Okay, everybody, welcome back to the meeting. And the next item on the agenda is the notice of motion, and it's the Brexit risk to our rights, the retained EU law bill. And I believe it's coming from Councillor Rebecca Fogarty. Thank you.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I think this is possibly my third, if not my fourth, motion that I've spoken on since becoming a councillor. And it brings me great sorrow that on every occasion I've had to make a speech to oppose the ongoing efforts of the Westminster government to fundamentally erode all of our rights. And I think I'm going to be speaking on it twice this evening, not just once. So this motion is about the retained EU law bill. The acronym is REUL, pronounced rule, as in one rule for them and another for the rest of us. This bill has been described as not right for the UK, and it is certainly not right for Wales. It is downright dangerous. It is an affront to parliamentary democracy and devolution, and it is not wanted by anyone except a tiny minority of Conservative ministers. Just to outline some of the protections that are at risk if this bill goes through in its current form. The right to paid annual leave, the maximum 48-hour week and rest breaks in the working day, nature conservation, marine and freshwater quality and pollution legislation, all under threat. Equal pay and parental leave paid. The maternity charity Pregnant Then Screwed has described this bill as a reversal in women's rights for that reason. And perhaps most dangerously, health and safety at work, including in construction. I'm not even sure whether we know that that list is complete, because until at least certainly fairly late in the process, there was key legislation missing from the government's own rule dashboard. This piece of legislation gives Tory ministers powers to sunset or bring to an end laws with a direct impact on areas of devolved legislation. And for that reason, I'm really pleased, absolutely delighted that the Senedd voted not to give its consent to this legislation earlier in the week. Clause 15 of the bill allows any minister, individual minister, to revoke or replace secondary rule as they consider to be appropriate. And the Law Society Gazette has indicated that ministers acting on their own volition could create new criminal offences without recourse to parliamentary scrutiny. The definition of alternative provision is missing, and it's therefore no surprise that this has been termed the do what you like clause. It is absolutely outrageous that the members of parliament that represent every one of us in this room and every one of our constituents will have absolutely no say over the pieces of legislation that will be sunsetted should this all go ahead. It's therefore no surprise that the number of bodies against the bill are many and various. Peter McGettrick, the chair of the British Safety Council, is opposed to the bill because he is concerned by the risk of increased deaths at work. That is how serious this is. The unions are against it. Multiple organisations relating to the construction industry are against it. The National Trust, I've already mentioned that the Senedd has refused consent this week, describing it as a reckless and irresponsible approach. And most interestingly, senior Tories are challenging the government's power grab through a cross-party amendment to the legislation, showing that it hasn't even got the support of the entire party that brought us the absolute catastrophe that is Brexit in the first place. So for all of these reasons, I hope that this evening we will back this motion to wholeheartedly oppose the retained EU law bill and call on both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition to do everything in their power to ensure that it does not go ahead. Thank you.
Councillor Fogarty, can I have a seconder, please?
Yes, Chair, I'll second, and can I associate myself with the comments made by Councillor Fogarty. I think she's absolutely right and right to move this motion. This isn't the retained EU law bill, it's the workhouse bill. This is a retrograde step to strip workers and people in this country of their rights. There are, as Councillor Fogarty said, a group of Conservative MPs who are so blinded by hatred of anything to do with the EU that they would see us taken back to times when people did not enjoy the rights which this country helped put in place. I mean, we formed and put forward many of the EU laws that this small group of misplaced and badly misjudged individuals want to now take out. I mentioned this motion about writing to both the leader of the opposition and to the Prime Minister. I'm more than happy to do that. And as I've said before, clearly the people of the UK were sold a lie with Brexit. Prime Minister Johnson, several Prime Ministers ago, came along with a EU deal that was an absolute nightmare, which left this country in a very, very detrimental position. Prime Minister Sunak, we'll skip over Prime Minister Truss because that was another disaster of a different proportion, but Prime Minister Sunak has now put in place the Northern Ireland Protocol, and of course trumpets the fact that Northern Ireland has this amazing deal that is not matched anywhere else in the rest of the world. It's the deal that we all used to have before they negotiated it away. So, you know, I absolutely support this motion. I absolutely support its intent. And I do hope that all of the sensible parliamentarians of whatever party in Westminster do their best, as with colleagues in the Lords, to stop this bill becoming law.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I will be brief. But I do feel strongly and passionately about this. I've made no secret that I was a Remainer, was totally against Brexit, but those of us in this democracy recognise and respect the process. So we respected the process about Brexit. That was the people's choice. But at the time, knocking the doors, talking to people in the communities, there was little to no information about what Brexit actually meant. And we feared at the time, and we talked to the public and talked to residents and said, this is exactly what it could mean. It could mean a removal of our rights and an erosion of things which are there to protect us. The European Time Directive, health and safety on construction sites. We pride ourselves as a council that we do everything by the book and we make sure that our people working on our sites are safe at all times and we follow those safety measures which are in place for a reason. And so I'm not surprised. I'm deeply disappointed and deeply saddened to see that we have to do this, but I'm not surprised at all. This is exactly what we thought when the Conservatives said we'll have freedom from Europe to make our own decisions, make our own policies. They didn't say this on the doorstep. They didn't tell the public. So therefore, they withheld information and they lied. And I will be fully supporting this notice of motion. And as the leader and as Councillor Fogarty have said, I hope that UK government will sit up and take notice.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Peter Black. Councillor.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I very much support this motion. Just a couple of days ago, the Chair of the Office for Budget Responsibility said that the impact of Brexit effectively has reduced overall output of the UK economy by 4%, and is actually comparable to the impact of COVID. And that isn't what this motion is about, but I think that's just, you know, what we were told was going to happen and what's actually happening is not the case. And certainly during the referendum campaign, I remember those campaigning to leave made very clear promises that they were not going to undermine the sort of rights which are covered by this bill. They definitely said we're not going to impact on your working time directives and equal pay and equality, but they are, and this bill gives them the power to do that. EU deprived laws in this data protection, cybersecurity, consumer rights, intellectual property, tax, public procurement, insolvency, agency workers, working time and equal pay, construction and real estate and commercial agents, just to name a few. In fact, the National Archive has identified, I think, 3,800 laws which could be affected by this bill. And the scary thing is that the way this sunset clause works is that all these things will cease to exist by the end of 2023 or possibly 26 if it's extended, unless legislation is passed to keep them in place, which means all the minister has to do is to do nothing, and they disappear. And that means you're putting a huge amount of power into the hands of individual ministers, and that in itself is disturbing. And I'm sure that's one of the reasons why a number of Tories like David Davis are unsettled by this, because they don't believe that parliamentary powers should be vested in individuals, which is what this bill effectively does. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's important that we do everything possible to oppose it. There is one thing about this motion which I am a bit uneasy about, which is the very last paragraph, writing to the Leader of the Opposition in Westminster, seeking his assurance. I mean, are we not sure he's going to oppose it? I mean, I'm a bit concerned about this, because, you know, so far the opposition in Parliament against anything to do with Brexit has been very lukewarm, from certainly from the Labour Party. I know my party is not doing as much as I'd like him to do, but, you know, if we're not certain that the Leader of the Opposition is going to oppose this, then that is very worrying indeed. And I think we certainly should be making sure that he does that. And I will leave that to my colleagues on the opposite benches to put the pressure on Mr. Keir Starmer to make sure that he is opposed to this in a way he hasn't been so far. But I will happily support this motion, Chair.
Councillor Walton.
Yeah, thanks, presiding member. Yeah, just to re-quote what the leader said, I find it a bit of a sick joke that this is called the retained EU law bill, because what it's doing is the exact opposite. It's trying to get rid of laws, good laws, fair laws, laws that are fair to everybody across the UK. And why? Well, the cynic in me thinks it's very clever of the Tory UK government to take advantage of Brexit in order to push this kind of thing through. And what scares the hell out of me, this goes too far in the first place. But if this goes ahead, then that's it. You can forget the whole lot. They'll all get eroded gradually over the years. There'll be no stopping them. And it's a slippery slope that words fail me, because it's terrible.
Thank you, Councillor Walton. Councillor Peter May.
If we go back to the original referendum itself, I'll put on record I was a Remainer. But it was a big cement mixer of people from all political parties. It was divisive. Some people from certain parties voted for, some voted against. One thing I do know, though, is it takes a long time for campaigning and sacrifice to build up fundamental rights and freedoms and protections. What's alarming about this bill is that all of these sacrifices, time, lives, are basically going to be, for want of a better word, disbanded at the stroke of a pen. I very sympathise dearly with Councillor Black's analogy. A sunset clause means they're just going to drift away into the sunset without anybody doing nothing, which is a default position. So I wholeheartedly will be supporting this motion.
Other speakers? No. Councillor Indian Jones, sorry. You're on
Thank you.
Yeah,
good. Thank you, presiding member. Yeah, I think it's important, listening to some of the comments, we need to remember that people did vote to leave the EU, and sometimes I think people forget that we can't accept bits of democracy. We have to accept the bits some people don't like as well. This particular bill, as has been alluded to, will bring all retained. It will by December, the end of December, the 31st of December, all remaining retained EU law will either be repealed or assimilated into UK domestic law. It is vital, as far as I'm concerned, that we retain our high standards and protections, and supporting British workers and ensuring British products are the best they can be. And I think that is vitally important. I think there's a lot of scaremongering going on out there. The bill will allow Parliament to scrutinise EU regulations and pass judgments on them in a way that it was never allowed to do when we were in the EU. you know, also it'll support businesses by ridding them of burdensome red tape. And many of us can remember the amount of red tape that was being inflicted on us by the European Parliament. So it'll make, you know, we wanted to make the UK the best place in the world to do business and help grow our economy. I think Councillor Back mentioned the Labour leader, and yes, indeed, you know, in fact, he did attempt to block Brexit, and at least 48 times, in fact, and that delayed Brexit happening. And you know, that's why we're further down the road. Otherwise, it would have been, we would have been ahead. But you know, they were failing then to deliver the priorities of the people, because people voted in this country to leave. But I'm pleased Labour now think that Brexit is okay, and obviously are working to ensure that it happens. And thankfully, I am thankful that it is the UK government that are implementing these measures.
Thank you, Councillor Jones. Councillor Holly.
I must admit, Councillor Jones, I have heard some rubbish in this chamber in my life, but that really takes a lip biscuit, because let's
Well, I
be
think
blunt.
it's usually from you, Chris.
Hang on, you know, let's be honest about this now. Red tape. There's a guy who has a vineyard in the southeast of England. He now produces more paperwork to export to France than he's ever done before. So to cut the red tape is rubbish. That's not going to happen. You go to look at the Northern Ireland Protocol. That had to be changed dramatically because of what the so-called deal that the former Prime Minister Johnson actually sort of said it was a oven ready, what have you. What happened in Northern Ireland? It failed. The simple fact is Brexit is a disaster. And it's a disaster for our engineering firms, it's a disaster for our chemical industry, and it's a disaster for our food industry. There are no industries in this country that are not being affected. An example of that is you go to some of the car manufacturers and ask them about buying in components from Europe, and you see the paperwork that they now have to fill in. If you buy an alternator from Spain, or you buy a part for a suspension part from Hungary, you now have to fill in extra paperwork to come into the UK. So it hasn't cut down on red tape. It has been an absolute disaster. Ask anybody who has stood in an airport with a passport waiting to come back into the country. Ask them. And if you'd say that, yes, it was a democracy, we have to accept the right, but in every democracy, we have the right to actually say you were wrong and vote against it, but also speak against it. But the way you are talking and the way that many of the people in Parliament are talking is we have no rights to speak against it. We don't know what we're talking about. We do know what we're talking about. We see it regularly. And I know from colleagues that I used to work with in the engineering industry will tell you that this has been an absolute disaster. And the sooner that we can get into some sort of negotiation, either to rejoin the single market in some shape or form, the better it will be. And I'm afraid, you know, I sincerely hope that the Labour Party, I know my own party, are desperate to actually put it on the agenda that we get back in the single market to protect jobs and to increase our economy. Because as Councillor Black has rightly pointed out, the effect of Brexit on our economy has been over 4%. So I definitely will be supporting this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Holly. I got Councillor Holland, sorry.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Linda Jones. And when you said we only get to keep bits, are they the true bits or the bits that were misrepresented to a lot of the country? And as a woman, I find that this is an attack on women, on minorities, on vulnerable people. It is scary, and some people need to check their privilege.
Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I think with any change, there's always going to be an element of uncertainty, and whether you can laugh about it, there is always going to be uncertainty with change, whether that's good or bad. The UK government did deliver the manifesto, and that is part of this deal. I can appreciate there's some concerns, but I also come from an engineering background, and I can say that we delivered business as usual with no disruption. So whether businesses have adapted accordingly, there was no parts being delayed on our end. I've gone out to businesses recently asking that very question about Brexit. And it's been interesting to see how they have adapted and changed. I can't speak for every business, nor can you, but in the businesses I've seen that we should be extremely proud of in Swansea, that are distributing right across the world and adapting fantastically. This is all part of Brexit, and it's whether you agreed with it or not, that is going to be following suit. Also within the motion, I noticed that you mentioned the cost of living, which is absolutely an issue, but I can't help myself but also realise that, you know, in the news this week, your Welsh Labour government in Wales failed to allocate and spend 155.5 million. Don't you think that would have gone a long way in buffering things up? Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Keating.
Well, it does make me angry when Councillor Jones says we must accept it. We must accept it. And it makes me furious because accept which bits? I'd love to have the sort of money that they said on the side of the bus that was going into the NHS. Yeah. That would be lovely. Oh, I'd accept that. That would be really nice. And I accept staying in the single market, which was something they actually said we were going to do, and have Brexit. It's just infuriates me. And as for the engineers who are doing so well in Swansea, I bet they were doing just as well, if not far better, before Brexit. Thank you.
Right. Cyril, Councillor Anderson, sorry.
Thank you, Presiding Member. Well, I've got to hold my head up in shame because I was told loads of lies. I voted for Brexit. I'm maybe just one throughout all this, throughout the members. So my question to Councillor Jones is, where is the £350 million we were promised back to put back into the NHS instead of into Europe? I totally support this motion that's put forward.
If there's no other questions, I'll come back to Councillor Fogarty, please. Oh.
Oh, my question was, are we going to give Councillor Jones time to respond to?
I don't think he wanted to respond.
Oh, right. Sorry. Sorry.
So Jones, do you wish to respond? Councillor Lyndon Jones?
No, I made my, I made the point.
Thank you.
Thank you, though.
Okay, back to you then, Councillor Fogarty.
Thank you, Presiding Member, and I welcome the many contributions that we've had this evening, with two fairly notable exceptions. It will not surprise you to learn. If Councillor O'Brien wants to go down the route of deflecting so outrageously, then I'll deflect right back. You know what would really help in the cost of living crisis is the money that was promised us on the side of the bus, is the money that's been taken from the Welsh taxpayer through austerity measures, is the millions that's been wasted on PPE. So let's just not go down that route, okay? I did want to kind of also just cut down on the lie about the democratic deficit that is just peddled endlessly in the debate about Brexit. All EU legislation went through the Houses of Parliament to be adopted on the British statute book. It is outrageous to suggest that this has been imposed on us from afar. Whatever you might think, this is not the Brexit that people voted for. And on the the House of Commons legislation page, this is described as implementing the government's policies outlined in the benefits of Brexit paper, which was published in early 22. And whatever those benefits were supposed to be, I've not seen any of them, and it certainly wasn't the erosion of all of our fundamental rights that, as have been so articulately spoken about this evening, have been hard fought for. To come back to Councillor Lewis's points, I genuinely believe that if the public were more widely aware of the implications of this bill, there would be demonstrations on the street. And that is why I have brought this motion this evening, because I think it's really important that there is wider understanding of what is at stake here. Coming to Councillor Black's point about the centralisation of power in individuals, which is very dangerous. The thing that worries me equally is the incompetence of individuals. And there is a risk here that ministers might just overlook a really important piece of legislation that protects our rights, protects our safety at work, and it'll just go sailing off into the sunset, and there'll be nothing any of us can do about it. In terms of seeking the assurance of the Leader of the Opposition, I sort of take the point. I, of course, have absolute confidence that both he and our local MPs are doing everything they can to oppose the bill, and I think it's really important that we're shouting about that from the rooftops. So this isn't any part of the Brexit that people have voted for. It is about erosion of rights. It is about centering power in individuals. Let's not undo years, decades of progress for the pet project of a minute Tory elite. Chair, I call for a named vote.
Okay, everybody. I will be reading out your names, and the only answers I need to hear is whether you're for, against, or abstaining. So that's just in relation to the notice of motion on the Brexit risk to our rights. Councillor Cyril Anderson. Matthew Bailey. Sam Bennett.
For.
Patience Bentu.
For.
Peter Black.
For.
Jan Curtis.
For.
Adam Davis.
For.
Mike Day. Phil Downing.
For.
Ryland Doyle. Mike Dirk.
For.
Kerry Evans. Gone, okay. Chris Evans.
For.
Mandy Evans.
For.
Wendy Fitzgerald. Rebecca Fogarty.
For.
Robert Francis Davis. Nicola Furlong. Louise Gibbard.
For.
Fiona Gordon.
For.
Kevin Griffiths. Hayley Gwilliam.
For.
Joe Hale. Terry Hennigan. Victoria Holland.
For.
Chris Holly. For. Paxton Hood Williams. David Hopkins.
For.
Linda James. Oliver James.
For.
Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Alan Jeffrey. Di Jenkins.
For.
Jeff Jones. Lyndon Jones.
Against.
Mary Jones.
For.
Matthew Jones.
For.
Sandra Joy. Sarah Keaton.
For.
Elliot King.
For.
Hannah Lawson.
For.
Andrea Lewis.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Richard Lewis. Wendy Lewis.
For.
Paul Lloyd. Michael Locke.
For.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Penny Matthews.
For.
Apologies. Peter May.
For.
James McGettrick.
For.
Francesca O'Brien.
Against.
Angela O'Connor. David Phillips. Cheryl Philpott. Jess Pritchard,
For.
Sam Pritchard, Alison Pugh,
For.
Stuart Rice, Kelly Roberts, Bridget Rowlands,
Against.
Robert Smith,
For. For.
Andrew Stevens,
For.
Rob Stewart,
For.
Graham Thomas, Will Thomas, Mark Tribe,
Abstain.
Gordon Walker, Leslie Walton,
For.
Mike White,
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone? That's 54, 3 against and 2 abstentions.
Okay, that's carried and thank you. So we move on to the next notice of motion, and that's the illegal immigration bill. And I think it's Sam is leading on this. Sam Pritchard.
Thank you, presiding member. The UK Tory government has said that the proposals that they've laid out to solve are there to solve the crisis surrounding asylum seekers. I agree with the UK government. There is a crisis, but it is a crisis of morality. It's a crisis of compassion, of dignity and respect towards our fellow humans. What we see in Westminster is those who have the privilege of wealth, the privilege of power, fame, a good pension, second houses. Those are the people stripping away rights from people that have no other, they have nothing else other than the rights that are being stripped away from them. This is wrong and it is abhorrent. And I just want to touch upon the tone of the debate, because as the Prime Minister screams as loud as his lungs can, stop the boats, stop the small boats, I feel like he's forgotten that on those boats are people, are families, are children. And I think the reality is they are fleeing, risking their lives because their lives are already at risk where they are. And I think there is a lack of compassion that has been showed. And there is a solution. There is money to help people. And instead of focusing on all of these small boats, I believe we need to focus on the big boats, the yachts, the cruises owned by the millionaires and the billionaires that avoid tax. I think that there is clearly money here to help people. The problem is the money is remaining with those who are wealthy instead of being redistributed to support those who are most at risk. The other worrying development is that of modern slavery. The PM has stated that there will be people who will not benefit from modern slavery protections. William Wilberforce led the abolition of slavery in 1807, and yet in 2023, there are people who are going to be at risk of modern slavery. I cannot believe we are having this discussion. And this is not, Council, this is not just a London or an England or Westminster problem. But on the 13th of March, Andrew R.T. Davis, the leader of the Conservative Party in Wales, he tweeted, and I quote, "Anti-slavery legislation is being abused. Time to crack down on it." I mean, seriously, what world are these people living in? That freedom is being abused by people not being in slavery. And I know the argument is that I'm a biased Labour Party politician using politics to disagree with anything that the UK government would say. Well, I want you to listen to this quote. "The Home Office knows that this bill means that genuine victims of modern slavery will be denied support." And what anti-Tory campaigner was that? What lefty lawyer made that statement? Well, that was made by former Tory PM Theresa May herself. There is clearly identification that this bill that is being proposed is fundamentally and morally wrong. This is genuinely shocking that we have to fight not only to be welcoming, but we have to fight for anti-slavery laws to be applied to all people. That is shocking and fundamentally vile. Can members in this chamber not see why many of our residents are frightened about receiving racist abuse in the streets, worried about the direction that this country is heading in, worrying about what it means for them and their families? That is why this motion calls not just to condemn the actions of the UK government, which is a focus on the negative, but it also calls to show support for the positive, for this council to reaffirm our solidarity and support for the amazing work that City of Sanctuary does in supporting those who most need it. It is vital that this council sends a message to our residents that Swansea is still welcoming, that Swansea still cares, that Swansea is still compassionate, that our city is still a city of sanctuary. And we can do that by supporting this motion. And so with that, presiding member, I formally move this motion.
Mr. Bridger, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll second the motion. And again, I would absolutely associate myself with the comments made by Councillor Pritchard. I think this is the first time I've seen a bit of honesty from the UK government, because they've actually put the take on the bill in the title. It is an illegal immigration bill. It's the first time we've seen the Tories be honest about anything. But it is linked to the debate we were just having on the previous motion, because you start to see the full scope of Tory policy here, which is to strip away the rights of people already in the UK and then deny rights to anybody who wants to come to the UK. How on earth will a Tory government that doesn't even care about its own citizens give a thought about anybody fleeing conflict or war from anywhere else? And you know, we all saw Suella Braverman out in Rwanda complaining that her image had been photoshopped. Well, I saw the real image. It was just as bad. They were standing around laughing in front of detention centres built for the purpose of sending people without appeal direct to Rwanda. These could be people fleeing rape, fleeing torture, fleeing war. No appeal, straight to Rwanda, because they haven't come through a safe route. Well, the reason they haven't come through a safe route is because they don't exist, because this government has closed many of them, taking away the chance for people. So it creates the problem that it then seeks to try and justify a response to. And of course, R.T. Davis, well, I'm not sure what planet that man is on. I really am not. I mean, I shudder daily at the tweets that person puts out. He has no place in British politics, as far as I'm concerned, right? He's completely lost the plot. And, you know, I think, you know, it's only a matter of time, I think, before he's banned from social media for some of the things he's saying. And, you know, for the government then to, you know, pick a fight with a sports presenter on the BBC just because they have the audacity to point out the fact that the language and the tone being used by the current UK government is similar to the tone and the words used by the government in Germany in the 1930s. Well, actually, if you spent a bit of time watching the BBC the documentaries on TV last night and the week before about the rise of what happened, many of the themes being used against Jews and other people are exactly the ones being used now. And the nub of it is, it's covering up the failure and the greed of the Tory government and blaming everyone's problems on people coming from abroad. It's the oldest trick in the book. And that is what this government is seeking to do. And they should be rightly condemned for it. And I hope everybody will support this motion today.
Councillor Stewart. I got Councillor Elliot King, please.
Yeah, thank you, presiding member. I really think Councillor Pritchard has raised a really important point about sending a positive message about Swansea being a proud city of sanctuary. And I think also as cabinet member with responsibility for equalities, I'm really proud that the work that our officers and Councillor Gibbard did in taking forward the human rights city, and that applies to everyone. Those are human rights for everyone. And we've seen widespread condemnation of this bill across the community and across the international community. I read recently an article in the British Medical Journal that Médecins Sans Frontières had written. For those of you who maybe don't know, MSF is an international humanitarian aid organisation, provides support in over 72 countries. And they reflected, in their words, that this was a very insidious policy, because for people who are seeking the safety, there are virtually no safe and legal routes because the government has closed and restricted them. So people are left with no choice but to take huge risks and attempt these dangerous crossings, and even with the threat of the punishment when they arrive in the UK. And the legislation, therefore, was designed to deliberately inflict harm on these people and dehumanize people seeking safety. A lot has been held up around the model used in Greece, and MSF have made a lot of comment around that as well. And they comment where the system there, where people who are seeking safety are contained in isolated and highly securitized centres on 2 islands of Greece. Now, we heard recently an announcement of 2 former army bases that are going to be used for this purpose. And they see there people who've been exposed to appalling levels of violence during their journeys, with a really high percentage of mental health problems related to the psychological trauma that they've suffered. And this is exacerbated by the deplorable accommodation standards and the lack of information about their legal status and being confined in these places, isolated away from anywhere. And that is something that's really been observed. And we've also seen, of course, comment that actually, in reality, this bill is not going to gain what it is designed for, because half the people, as the Refugee Council have highlighted, who crossed the Channel last year, come from just 5 countries, and those 5 countries have high asylum grant rates. But also, we can't remove these people to their country of nationality, so we can't remove, for example, an Afghan back to Afghanistan. They can only be removed to a third country, but we don't have any arrangements in place. The Rwanda scheme is subject to legal challenge, and even by the figures that were available, that was looking at accommodating 200 people a year. So in reality, what will happen is there will be tens of thousands of people left in the UK, many who will have very strong asylum claims, left in a permanent limbo. They won't be able to be removed. They won't be able to have their asylum claim processed. They won't be able to be reunited with their family and get on with their lives. I think of real concern to me also was the things that the Children's Commission has highlighted on the real impact on children of this bill, and I think a violation really of our child protection frameworks in the UK, undermining the Refugee Convention and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Lastly, is the question of morality. We have a legal and moral duty in the UK and an obligation to pay our part in the international refugee protection system. We take a small number compared to our European neighbours, and there are no the prohibitions on granting status, combined with the failure repeatedly to set out safe and legal routes, really suggests a complete abandonment of this long-standing and our moral and legal obligation. And I am very strongly supporting this motion. Thank you.
Again, Councillor Bento.
Thank you, presiding member, sorry. It is a disgrace that individuals and families who are fleeing from danger continue to suffer from the injustice and stigma of not just a human rights blind Tory government, but one which is inherently racist. Not minding that the United Nations International Day for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination continues to focus on the urgency of combating racial discrimination. However, at the exact period, and I know the leader mentioned this earlier, at the exact period of commemorating this International Day and the 75th anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was just over a week ago, Suella Braverman arrived in Rwanda to either progress or finalize discussions on the deportation of immigrants from this country. Now, what we saw on television in the photos that Suella took in Rwanda is what Rwanda wants us to see. Detention centers, but there are no detention centers. They are displaced people's camps. Africa knows the truth about this story, and President Kagame is doing everything within his power to suppress this truth. So I see this as a deliberate racist act that underrates the Declaration of Human Rights undertaken by this country, and we must do all that we can to stop this act, which has a huge potential of portraying this country as a global demon against humanity and its values. And for these reasons, I strongly support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Black.
Thank you, Chair. And I very much associate myself with all the previous comments by the speakers. I think this motion is a very important one and certainly highlights the massive injustice which this bill represents, but also represented by the government's policy towards genuine asylum seekers who are fleeing rape, war, climate change, a whole host of injustices, and have basically been left with no legal route to claim asylum in the UK. In fact, the UN Refugee Agency only, I think, the last couple of days described this bill as saying it would amount to an asylum ban in the UK, which in itself is against the UK's international obligations, because we are signed up to international treaties in terms of accepting asylum seekers, but the government has not left any legal routes. And of course, this latest notion of the government and how they're going to deal with the small boats, they're going to put them on big boats. And if anybody saw Great Expectations on the weekend, will know that this is reintroducing the prison hulks, which Magwitch, of course, from Great Expectations was a prisoner on before they were shipped out to Australia. And this is where we've got to. They're putting them in prison, in camps. They're putting them on boats where conditions are as appalling as they were on those prison hulks. So most probably without the beating, so I can't be certain about that. But certainly they're as appalling as they were in those Victorian times. And these people are being treated inhumanly by this government in the way they house them. And you know, if they want a solution to small boats, if they want a solution to asylum claims and that, well, they have it in their own hands. They have to, by basically putting in place proper procedures whereby people can claim asylum, legal routes they can claim asylum, by making sure those claims are dealt with expeditiously, so that there isn't a huge number of people waiting to have their claims heard, and often by people who are cynical and being given an agenda to work to, and of course working with other European countries instead of setting themselves against France or working with France to make sure they can be managed on the other side of the channel, so we actually know that people are able to have a route to come into the UK. There's a whole load of things which could be done to properly manage asylum, to make sure that this inhumanity does not continue, that people are not having to put their lives at risk in small boats crossing the channel. But this UK government is only concerned with sound making noises about basically advocating to the popular right wing, very much as the leader has said, as that sort of language that was used in the 1930s to try to build up support, the nationalist support. They think this is the only way they're going to get re-elected. It's not, they're not going to get re-elected this way, but in doing so, the victims, the real victims of their rhetoric are people and families and children, men and women who are suffering absolutely inhuman conditions just to be able to be safe, and that is wrong, and we have to condemn that with every fibre of our being. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Fogarty.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I will be brief, as I appreciate members have heard a lot of my voice this evening. And I could speak about why this is such a horrendous bill, probably from now until next month's council meeting. But my colleagues have done such a good job in outlining its flaws. What I want to do this evening is talk about Alan and Marilyn Thomas. So I don't think they'll mind me saying that they are a couple of advanced years. They've lived in Swansea for a long time. In 2010, they were the co-founders of Swansea City of Sanctuary, which has already been mentioned today, but also a lesser-known scheme called Share Towie, which matches volunteers who have a spare room in their property with destitute asylum seekers who would otherwise be homeless. These are volunteers who step up and do the job a compassionate government should be doing in providing basic shelter and connection to the community that wants to welcome them. So Alan and Marilyn, like me, hold a simple refrain to be true. Refugees are welcome here. There are people who feel the same way as Alan and Marilyn in my ward and in your ward, all over Swansea. But Alan and Marilyn have lived for a long time in Mumbles, represented by 3 of our Conservative colleagues, 2 of whom are here this evening. So my question is this: will our Conservative colleagues vote with their Westminster masters or with the residents that they have been elected to represent?
Councillor Fogarty, Councillor Rice.
Thank you, presiding member. I speak to completely associate myself with the motion and its intentions as well. I think mainly what the key thing is here with national government and a lot of the media is that it's a distraction technique for a failure in their immigration policy. Now, there are many, many more people 10 years on in the government who are waiting for their asylum claims to be dealt with than there were at the beginning. And what's been happening here is people have been left in limbo, many of which, as we've heard around here, have got valid claims, need to be processed, need to get on with their lives and resettle into a new country, which is hard unto itself, But there are some people who may need to be dealt with in a different way, but with compassion in whatever way that you do deal with it. From my perspective, you just keep seeing more and more red meat thrown to the press, more and more distraction techniques. Small boats are a small percentage of the people. They're not, they're not that big issue that people say that they are. What they are is a massive issue for the people who are on the boats. They're a massive issue for the people that drown, the massive people who are using and abusing those people and potentially putting them into modern day slavery. I mean, I can't believe we're in a situation now where a government is looking at modern day slavery and saying that people can't be protected by that legislation. Where are we, Mauritania? It just doesn't make any sense. It's something that we really need to stand up as a group of people across society and get right. Yes, there are some people who may well be coming on the boats who may not have a valid claim, but let's look at it from the perspective of the person. Why are they making this travel here? Why are they doing the things that they're doing? They're probably doing it to either become safe or because they have no other option or choice. So look, Britain is not this place that the media would say that has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people more than anywhere else in the country coming here for refugee and asylum. Just look across Europe. Our partners in Europe have many more claimants. And I think, with that in mind, I'm fully supporting this.
Councillor Rice, I got 2 more. Oh, sorry, I got Louise. Councillor Pugh.
Thanks, presiding member. As cabinet member here for asylum seekers and refugees, then, I say for shame on this government. This elite group of politicians were, in my opinion, are abusing their positions with people's lives at stake. Asylum seeking is a legal right. It is not illegal. The cruel side, though, is that you have to be in the country to seek asylum. So how else are people going to come here? We don't exactly make it easy for people, and I've nursed, unfortunately, children that have died, adults that have died, but I will never get the image of the little 2-year-old boy who was washed up on shore on the beach out of my head, as I don't think others here will tonight either. We cannot be allowing this to happen. We cannot be putting people through this. People don't go through all that they're doing just for the fun of it to get you. And look, and I thank God that as a council, we welcome people here. We, as many people have said tonight, and we're a city of sanctuary, and our officers and our partners in the third sector and all the volunteers do everything we can here to support people and to ease they stay, because they don't have it easy even when they get here. They really don't. And I just question, why in this country, why are we allowing this immoral group of privileged people to make these decisions? So I do support this motion tonight. Thank you, presiding member.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Evans, please.
Thank you, presiding member. I think what we don't hear enough is that immigration is actually a benefit to our country and our society. The new ideas and the new outlooks. that people bring actually drives innovation in our economy. And if the government wants to stop the small boats, the quickest way to do that is just to open up safe routes. Not only that, the people that are already in the country, let's start by letting them work. Let's let them earn a living whilst they're waiting for their claims to go through. Not only does that mean that we'd be able to pick some of the crops that are rotting in the ground at the moment after Brexit, but it also means that there'd be money being earned, which the Treasury could then get taxable income from. So it's kind of a win-win to deal with things that way. I also think that the media does have a bit of a responsibility here. They do need to call out the lies of people saying that refugees should stop in the first safe country. That's completely not in the international legislation whatsoever. And finally, yeah, it's just to, we need to, oh, sorry, it's just the same point again. Thank you, President Member. Finished.
Thank you. Louise Gibbard, Councillor Gibbard, sorry.
Thank you, President Member. And wanted to really thank Councillor Pritchard for bringing this motion forward, and how important it is to restate our commitment as a city of sanctuary, as a human rights city. Councillor Black has stolen my line about great expectation, but I'm going to say it again as I've written, as I wrote it. Like many people, I tuned into BBC One to watch the new interpretation of Great Expectations, which when it was written was a biting commentary on 19th century Britain, with references to prison ships, child labour, child abuse, family scrimping and saving. And we're seeing the very same things on the news today in 2023. We live in an increasingly unstable world, much as, especially with the impact of climate change, and we're likely to see huge numbers of climate refugees as so much of the world becomes inhospitable. It's been heartening to see the response of the British people to the Ukrainian refugees, and this is the closest I'll ever come to praising the shower in Westminster, that the government has brought forward schemes to make this possible. But it's utterly depressing and, dare I say it, racist that for many this welcome doesn't extend to refugees from other parts of the world. As many have said tonight, there are no legal routes, and the vast number of people are displaced either within their own country of origin or in neighbouring countries. It's only right and proper that as one of the richest countries in the world that we do our bit. As the saying goes, you don't put your children on one of those small boats unless it's safer than the land.
Thank you, Councillor Gibbard. Councillor Philpott.
I think sometimes you have to be touched by a story to understand what it's all about. Last year, I met a lady from Rwanda. She, her husband, 2 teenage girls had managed to get out of Rwanda. A professional family. The fear that she went through to get out, as she was telling me over about a period of about an hour and a half, sort of all came tumbling out, was absolutely harrowing. The way that she and her daughters had to hide, because if they weren't murdered or mutilated or raped, that was the fear that they had every single day until they were able to escape. They came to Britain because they actually had qualifications that they knew that could be used in Britain, and they are all working. They are a fabulous family. But can you imagine? But what she said to me was, but what are you going to do? The news had just come out about refugees being sent to Rwanda. What will you do? I said, I don't know what to do. So to actually take part and to support this motion means at least I'm doing something. But when I went home, I looked at what had happened in Rwanda. I think, and this is why I said, we all have a perception, don't we? Oh, Rwanda. But what actually happened? 1994, in 100 days, because I think it's worth spelling it out. In 1994, in 100 days, the Rwandan genocide was one of the most notorious modern genocides. Nearly 1 million people were killed, and 250,000 women were raped and mutilated. But worse, the international community stood by and did nothing. We should be ashamed. So we support this motion, but we should still all be ashamed, because I feel ashamed, but I will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Philpott. I've got two more speakers, and that's Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Lyndon Jones. So, Councillor O'Connor.
Thank you. This isn't actually about who we should or shouldn't let into our country. This is about finding a way to put an end to criminal gangs, exploiting the most vulnerable. The UK has been a compassionate country and always has been, and a place where migrants are welcome. In fact, since 2015, we've offered safety to 480,000 people. I believe, and I hope that the UK will remain as compassionate as it always has been. However, never before has migration effectively been controlled by organised criminal gangs, and never before have so many people, including women and children, lost their life in trying to cross the English Channel by boat. I don't want any more lives lost. I don't want criminal gangs to profit from putting these people in such danger. One part of the solution is that we need to ensure that all migrants stick to the structured and proper process for people to apply for asylum in the UK. One that does not endanger the life of that person and the lives of others. A process which doesn't provide criminal gangs with a trade in people's lives. For any migrant who wishes to come here, the process they go through to apply for asylum must be fair. But surely it has to be safe. The idea of those coming here illegally by boat doing so because that is their only option is wrong. It's self-evident from the thousands who successfully apply through the proper means and who do not cross the channel in their own boat. If migrants understand that crossing illegally by boat will not endanger their lives but ultimately be fruitless, then they will soon come to realise that they need to come here lawfully. That is the first step to finally tackling the criminal gangs. Breaking up those gangs and the work that they do will not only be better for migrants, but it will be better for the UK too.
Thank you. Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Thank you, Presiding Member. I'd like to associate with myself with the words of Councillor O'Connor, because that is so true. And those criminal gangs who are exploiting people, taking their money to bring them and put them in those boats. Firstly, there's a difference which hasn't come out tonight between legal and illegal immigration. We have a balance, our duty, we have to balance our duty to support people in need with the responsibility to have genuine control of our borders. Over 45,000 people illegally crossed the channel in small boats last year. So it wasn't just a handful of people, as some people have said, putting real pressure on local public services, and all those people obviously abusing our laws. It is a fact, but many of those arriving in small boats originate from safe countries and travel through safe countries to skip the queue, and that can't be right. It is unfair that people come here illegally. It is unfair on those with a genuine case for asylum. It is unfair on those who come here legally when others try to cheat the system. It's very simple. The country and the government should decide who comes here, not criminal gangs. And we heard what the outcome of that could be from Angela. The Prime Minister and Home Secretary have already delivered a deal with France on the small boats. But in addition, a new arrangement with Albania. So the vast majority of Albanian illegal migrants can be looked at. It is a fact that of that 45,000, 1/3 of those arriving in small boats last year, almost 14,000 came from Albania, despite, as I say, it being a safe European country and NATO ally. Germany, France, Belgium and Sweden reject almost 100% of Albanian asylum claims and send them home. And as I say, 14,000 people from Albania, a safe country, arriving here, putting pressure on this country and spoiling it for those people with a genuine case for asylum. And somebody mentioned about having offshoring asylum seekers. Well, in fact, it was the last Labour government that introduced legislation permitting offshore of asylum seekers in 2004. And the Home Secretary of the time said it's a 21st century solution. So don't forget that it was a Labour solution. Labour's refusal to bring down immigration levels would see unlimited and uncontrolled immigration throughout the country, and that's not good. People in genuine need will and must always have a home in Britain. I've got many, many friends who have come to this country from many countries, and I class them as excellent friends and love their culture because I think it enhances our lives, and I think that is vital. Indeed, when you look at countries like Ukraine, where 6,400 Ukrainians have come to Wales alone. Indeed, I personally helped a number of families to get here, as well as unblock supply routes for supplies to get back to Ukraine. And I'm very proud to have done so. And I understand an additional 1,500 visas have already been granted to Ukrainians who are yet to travel to Wales. I met up with some of them because we meet up.
Can you sum up, Councillor Lyndon Jones?
Yes, I
Because I've got
will.
a lot of people waiting.
Yeah, I was just about to say that I met up with some of these families and it is humbling. But, you know, we don't always get it right in Swansea because only this week I've been helping a young Ukrainian family who had been housed in a flat here. And when they arrived, one wall was kicked in. There was blood on the bathroom wall and a terrible smell, but they were too frightened to keep the windows open. I've been told of one family who were thinking of returning to the war zone in Ukraine rather than stay in Swansea. And we all saw about that family on the BBC the other day. So, you know, and should I say there have been issues of bullying. We have real work to do in Swansea as well. So we can't say great city of sanctuary, it was a fine welcome because we've got real work from those examples that I've just said. But it is vital that we control immigration and we need to do it and we need to get a grip of it. So I will be voting against this motion. I am for immigration, for people, for the right reasons, but we are not to open the floodgates for illegal immigrants. And a lot of people here tonight have said that that is, by the look of it, what they support.
Okay, I've now closed the list. Okay, so I've got 3 more speakers and that's the last. The list is closed after that. So I've got Adam Davis next.
I just wanted to highlight on something that Councillor Lyndon Jones said. He said that people from Albania are coming from a safe country already. Well, he'll know that it's his home office that only has like about a 24% approval rating. So if he has a problem with people coming here from Albania, I suggest that he takes his personal grievance up with the Home Office that makes those decisions. But as we've heard, there's been no defence of the bill as is. It's been platitudes and waffle because no defence can be offered because it is nothing but, as has already been alluded to, it's an electoral trick. It's divide and rule. They know they can't run in the upcoming election on their record because it's dire. They know that they don't even mention levelling up anymore because that term has become toxic. So if the Tory members, as they've tried to make clear that they agree with us and that they agree with the City of Sanctuary, then they have a right and a duty to vote against this because this bill does nothing to address the issues that they have raised. The only thing that this bill does is seek to demonise some of the most vulnerable people who exist on this earth, because we've not heard any defence of taking away support for people who are trafficked here. So I appreciate that the debate is closed off, but I would love to hear a defence of why we are stripping some of the most vulnerable children on this earth of protections from modern slavery. Thank you.
Councillor Jardine.
Thanks, Chair. I had actually decided not to speak, but two of the last speakers has really forced me just to ask some questions. Councillor O'Connor talks about coming legally, and Councillor Jones also spoke along those lines about the Albanians and the Ukrainians. And it just makes me wonder, he's been out to help the Ukrainians and, you know, who else? What other refugee or asylum seeker has he or Councillor O'Connor been out to help? Have they ever spoken to someone that's walked for days, who's buried their children on the way? To me, I don't know. I often feel it's easy. We talk about City of Sanctuary, I've said this before. And I often smile when I hear that we're looking to have Wales as I think it's a country of sanctuary. And I think, how does that work? How does that work when we don't have any compassion? We don't really care. And I personally feel the Ukrainians have arrived via the safe route Councillor Jones is talking about because they're white, whether or not he wants to accept that. If himself or Councillor O'Connor can tell me of a safe route, a way that the refugees who have nothing, who are coming from a war-torn country, can apply and get here safely, I'm sure we could put some of that out and advise them how to do that. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jardine. I've got Councillor O'Brien.
I'll be very quick. Thank you, Presiding Member. I think this was always going to be a contentious issue, and I agree Swansea has welcomed and benefited from people not just who have been seeking refuge from a war-torn country, but from all parts of the world. Over 117,000 Ukrainians have settled in the UK, not to mention the resettlement programme for Hong Kong and Afghanistan, which we have to recognise. That is an excellent example of how the system should work safely, fairly and securely. Are we not forgetting, which Angela O'Connor did allude to, that this is human trafficking? These are the ones who are organised human traffickers exploiting the most vulnerable. So when you mentioned about the notice of motion and how we're the inhumane ones, I think we need to be directed at those who are putting those people in the boats to come across the channel. I also realise that how this could be peddled. I don't, even if we are against this, it's not a reflection of how we are as people. Okay, it is. Tomorrow, I will be going again to a charity which we've been involved in for some time, helping people and children who've been in conflict so that they can stay in their country and have hospital beds. That's what I will be doing over the next 2 days, trying to raise money for those children so that they can remain there with their families. But as Councillor Fogarty mentioned about if there's residents in the ward, happy to meet with them. And I admire anybody who's opened up their doors for anybody. But I hope that it's not peddled out, that we are deemed racist or fascist as what's usually poured out, when this is just to try and take control of immigration. Thank you.
And the last one is Councillor Stewart.
It wasn't to re-enter the debate, just to ask the councillors to correct some mistruths that they've peddled tonight. So I just want to make sure that they're clear that if they lie to this chamber, that is something that will be taken seriously. And as was said, I think Councillor Jardine posed exactly the question that I'm pointing out here. The only safe and legal routes into the UK are via the Homes for Ukraine, Hong Kong British nationals, overseas visa, Afghan Relocation and Assistance Policy, Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme, United Kingdom Resettlement Scheme, Mandate Resettlement Scheme, Community Sponsorship or Displaced Talent Visa Scheme. That is it. So as Councillor Jardine posed, and as Councillor O'Connor and Councillor Lyndon Jones were alluding to, there is this concept of queue jumping, people getting ahead. You cannot jump a queue that does not exist. So if you were coming from a war-torn area like Syria or like Iran, you could not come to this country through any route that you would consider they should. It does not exist. And therefore, for you to say, actually, you know, we've got to tackle the gangs, the only reason people are going to the gangs is because they don't have a safe route. It's not rocket science. But of course, I think your last comment, Councillor O'Brien, was the one that be told exactly what you think, which is you don't want people coming here at all. What you want is them to stay in their own country, not come here. You just said it. You just said that. And I think that is exactly what you and the rest of the Tories are really like. You do not want people coming to this country.
No, I want to go to the Point of order. I did not say on public.
Yes, you did.
No,
Yes,
I did not.
Yes, you did.
I said I am going tomorrow to help a charity
Yes.
which helps people
Stay in their own country.
Yes, that doesn't mean I don't support people coming to. So get your facts right.
Well,
I did not say that.
This is not a debate. I'm
No,
making
no,
a point.
it's not a debate.
I
I'm
listened
telling
quietly
you,
to the
leader.
member.
That is.
Chair, the member may not like the point
No, it's
I'm
not about
making.
liking. That is not what I said.
Across the chamber, thank you.
Chair, I will say again, the point of my intervention here is to say people have misled this chamber by the statements they have made. The three Conservative councillors have made statements which have been peddled time and time again by the UK government, which are not true. I'm giving them the opportunity now to remove those statements, retract them, and accept that what they've said is untrue, because you should not mislead people in this chamber.
Back to Councillor Pritchard then, please, to sum up.
There we go. Thank you, Presiding Member. I will allow, if any of the Conservative members do want to retract anything they've said, I will allow it. There we go. Then I will sum up. We heard from some of the councillors that it's a contentious issue. I didn't realise that opposing modern slavery was a contentious issue. But I am proud of the work that our council has done in becoming a human rights city. And this is the difference of leadership between the Tories in Westminster and the Labour administration in Swansea. In Swansea, we extend rights, and in London, they're eradicating rights. That is the reality of it. I want to be absolutely clear that as we discuss this motion, we need to realise that we do not know what it is like to flee war, to flee famine, to live in fear for who you are or for what you believe. We do not know that. And yet in this debate, I think we often forget the trauma of people who are fleeing for their lives. I do want to address that the solution to criminal gangs is obvious, that the Tory UK government needs to actually make it possible to legally claim asylum, and for the government to start processing asylum claims. You cannot just declare that the only way to claim asylum is illegal and then batten down the hatches and close the doors and say that's it. The reality is the government needs to make provisions for a safe and legal way, and it is not. This is clearly just division caused by the Conservative Party. It is seeking to divide this country and blame their own failings on refugees and immigrants. And they're blaming them on the reason why there isn't enough money, the reason why there isn't enough resources, while at the same time they are stuffing their pockets and getting richer and richer at the top. However, there is hope, because no matter how the UK government seeks to sow division, to fester an us versus them mentality, there is always hope, because we as a council can reaffirm our commitment to unity, to compassion, to sanctuary and to refuge. And because of the seriousness of this motion, I call for a name vote.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Again, I will ask you to answer for, against, or abstain. I will read your name out and just give me one of those answers. Thank you. Cyril Anderson.
For.
Sam Bennett.
For.
Patience Bento.
For.
Peter Black.
For.
John Curtis.
For.
Adam Hill. Sorry. Adam Davis.
For.
Sorry, Adam.
Boys.
Yeah, for. Phil Downing.
For.
Ryland Doyle. Mike Dirk. Kerry Evans. Chris Evans.
For.
Mandy Evans.
For.
Wendy Fitzgerald. Rebecca Fogarty.
For.
Nicola Furlong. Louise Gibbard.
For.
Fiona Gordon.
For.
Hayley Gwilliam.
For.
Joe Hale. No. Terry Hennigan. Victoria Holland.
For.
Chris Holly. For. Paxton Hood Williams. David Hopkins.
For.
Linda James. Oliver James. Yvonne Jardine.
For.
Alan Jeffrey. Di Jenkins.
For.
Jeff Jones. Lyndon Jones.
Against.
Mary Jones.
For.
Matthew Jones.
For.
Sandra Joy. Sarah Keaton.
For.
Elliot King.
For.
Hannah Lawson.
For.
Andrea Lewis.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Wendy Lewis.
For.
Paul Lloyd. Michael Locke.
For.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Penny Matthews.
For.
Peter May.
For.
James McGettrick.
For.
Francesca O'Brien. Angela O'Connor. Cheryl Philpott. Jess Pritchard.
For.
Sam Pritchard. Alison Pugh.
For.
Stuart Rice. Kelly Roberts. Bridget Rowlands.
Against.
Robert Smith.
For.
Andrew Stevens.
For.
Rob Stewart.
For.
Mark Tribe.
Against.
Gordon Walker. Leslie Walton.
For.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams. For. Have I missed anybody? No. So that's 48 for, 5 against with no abstentions.
Okay, thank you. That's carried. Can I thank you all for your patience? Tonight it's been a long session, but thank you all for your attendance.